The Opinion Today with Michael J. How's everybody doing? We've got a good show today. We are going to start with our favorite, ever since 2016, he's probably been the, as he would like to put it, the center of the universe. The despot dictator of North America, the guy that you love to love, in an obsequious sort of way, we share a middle initial. Donald, first clue, Donald. Not Donald Duck. Well, it could be Donald Duck. Donald J. Duck. Pleased to meet you, Donald J. Duck. I sell state secrets to my good duck friend Putin. Yikes. Did I say that? Can you imagine that? Who would ever have thunk? Now, we got a interesting saying, not where I sit, but somewhere. Stay where you're at, and I'll come to where you're to. That's YouTube for you. Stay where you're at, I'll come to where you're to. That's the internet for you. So, what we're going to do now is go to some of my favorite Americans, the Midas Touch, a.k.a. the Mega Torch, or the Mega Touch, sorry. Did I say that again? Good golly, that Freudian guy keeps popping up all the time. So we got two interesting gentlemen, one by the name of John Gardner, and the other one by the name of Harry Segal. And they're going to parachute in a Yale professor. Princeton? Harvard? Columbia? No, a Yale professor. Y-A-L-E. For the Trumpsters that can't spell. Just saying, folks. Is that derogatory? Am I speaking down? Damn right. You deserve it. Pull up your pants, pal. There. Had to get that out of my system. So anyways, we're going to go to the main screen. The main screen, you say. Oui, monsieur. Damn, wrong button. Gotta hit the right button. Ooh, two-pane screen. Two-pane. Especially designed for this particular instance. Okay, so the two gentlemen, let's get at her. And away we go.
Yes, we do. And if you like that, then listen to the whole show. I read somewhere that you wrote an article the day after.
Okay, so the Yale professor is Jason Stanley. So pay attention, folks. Maybe just turn up the volume a little bit. Remove all distractions. Remove all distractions. Yes. Pay attention. Once you understand that the gatekeeper to your mind to change the operating system of your mind is the left and right frontal lobes, which you only use 10% of your time. Can you imagine that? You are actually only present, consciously filtering what goes in and out of your system 10% of the time. Can you imagine that? So that's another topic which will take a few years to discuss. Could take longer depending on the crowd. Now, John Gardner, Harry Segal, Jason Stanley, take it away, folks.
To the election, in which you said the end of democracy was not a surprise. Now, that's a very controversial statement.
No, it's not a controversial. The end of democracy. How long have you not had it? This is the real question. How long have you not had it? First of all, you got a two-party system. I'm just going to throw it right at you guys. Because now if you're going to blow it up and rebuild it the right way. Two-party system. For how long? A long time. So, to get in the game, you got to have this thing called dough. We're not talking about a baker's thing. We're talking about money. So without the financial backing and the proxies, because you gotta get proxies to support your candidacy. So there's no real true democracy, even within a democracy. And that's why it's so important to continually upgrade the framework and how the democracy is structured, because it's a fragile system. And we've seen how fragile it is because you just had a Supreme Court create a fiefdom with a king. I'm not going to pull any punches. You allowed this. Is it unconstitutional? Damn right it is. You created, which this is the first time I'll ever go back to the founding fathers, because I don't believe in, bringing the past to the forefront. But the fact of the matter is, the whole reason why they structured the Constitution was to make sure that the United States of America would stay a republic and not become a kingdom. Do you understand that? Your Supreme Court, for the first time since the day one of the Constitution, has created a kingdom with this immunity ruling. And it's unconstitutional. And nobody's tearing it apart. That's got to go. It's got to go. And it's got to go yesterday. It should never have been allowed to stand, and you're taking it. Just saying. So there's my 3 cents. Used to be 2 cents. 3 cents now.
2 levels. A lot of people are asking, how dire are things? Has democracy been ended, or is there still a chance for resistance? And if so, what would that even look like?
Well, of course, there's a chance for resistance. Look at what just happened in Korea. The president tried to declare martial law. The people wouldn't stand for it. Look at what happened in Bangladesh. The students went on the street and took down the Sheikh Hasina, the authoritarian president. And now Bangladesh, they killed hundreds of students, but they still deposed the government. So of course there's resistance, and we live in a country that is legendary everywhere in the world for its resistance to fascism. And that is, and what I mean is the civil rights movement. The Jim Crow South was a one-party fascist, racial fascism, as it's traditionally theorized in the Black intellectual tradition, and a nonviolent nonviolent movement that had years and years of organizing and planning overthrew it. So now, of course, the South remains non-democratic.
I'm just going to add one thing. You understand right now that you have an electoral college system in place that dates back to the Civil War, and the reason why that's there was to appease the Southern slave owners, in order to put the Constitution together to make this a workable, viable structure.
Remains, North Carolina dominated by Republicans, even though there are more registered Democrats than Republicans. We know all of this. We know the ways in which the South has remained a one-party state, largely, and white-dominated. But no, there's always there's always routes out. Democracy is a practice. Democracy is not a on-off thing. It's a practice of trying to be guided by the 2 great democratic values, freedom and equality. And you're living in a democracy when there's this constant struggle to realize those values. And you're not living in a democracy where people are like, we love the king, and everything we do should be for the glory of the king.
Glory of the king. Is this starting to resonate? You got a president on a second term after one-term hiatus, and now, in order to be part of his administration, to be part of the government, you're being filtered depending on your loyalties. This should resonate very strongly with you, because this is a very, very dangerous precedence for the government to operate from the date of January 6, 2025 forward. The new administration, the president-elect, are filtering the people to work within this administration and also outside the administration's normal position of influence. It's already gone to the justice system. A justice system should be totally separate, and the Department of Justice should be totally separate from any political system or political runnings. And the administration of government of elections should be totally separate and not influenced by any political party. But you don't have that in the United States. And that's a serious issue. The fact that you have not continually refined the structure and the framework of the justice system and the election system, because it's ripe to be abused. And you're seeing it being abused right now.
That's not a democracy.
That's kind of what they're trying to get us to be at, right? I mean, that's kind of part of what you're talking about when you talk about rewriting history, when you talk about the use of language and propaganda. Maybe you could explain something about how these things shape people's minds in ways that then can shape politics.
Yeah, I mean, erasing history is about the education system, and the education system is there to prepare citizens either for democracy or for authoritarianism. In a monarchy, you would learn about the greatness of the monarch. You would learn about the greatness of the nation under the monarch. In a democratic system, you would have democratic schools and democratic universities that prepared you, the citizen, to be a policymaker, to be someone who's engaged in the business of the government. That's why in a democracy, you learn about other countries. You learn about the history of the Middle East, so you could make informed decisions about who's making the right choices about Israel, Palestine, and other countries. Once they start shutting down that kind of education, once they start telling people, okay, you can't learn about the history of the Middle East, you can't learn about the history of your country, you can't learn about the perspectives of LGBTQ citizens, then you're no longer living in a democracy. Just consult in your head. Look up, everyone, and consult in their head their model of a fascist or authoritarian state. Fascism being one variety of authoritarianism. It would be, they'd ask you to pledge allegiance to the nation all the time. They'd say you're first, you must love the nation and the leader represents the nation. And all this talk of democracy and all this talk of freedom and equality would not be there. It wouldn't be, okay, you wouldn't be asked to play a role in making decisions about what the nation could do. You'd be asked for blind obedience.
I was looking at your article too, which is, you talk about one of the conditions for the loss of democracy is gross inequality, which we've been seeing. I remember even 20 years ago, they were talking about how long can CEOs be making hundreds of millions of dollars when their workers are not? And in fact, my understanding, just looking at this moment in the culture, right, which is, first of all, you have a catastrophic working class that cannot afford to have a family in a house with two people working. They can barely do it. and they're demoralized and they're furious. Also, there's been a real degradation of the social norms and mental health norms, so that schools are not just schools. They're giving free lunch and free breakfast. They're doing assessments. They're doing mental health assessments. I had students doing psychotherapy under my supervision in the rural schools outside of Ithaca. The schools were beside themselves. I mean, they could barely get their kids to learn because they were suffering so much. And if you put that together with the breakdown of a kind of central media, where now you can go get your news in the way that you like it, it seems to me this is all coming together to create a terrible moment for us, an opportunity for Trump.
Yeah, so this just again gets back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the modern philosopher who sort of came up with the grand theory of how democracy could work. And Rousseau's idea was that democracy cannot work with gross inequalities, because then people filled with resentment for each other. And then a demagogue could come and exploit those resentments and aim them at scapegoats. So that's Rousseau's idea. And Rousseau's solution is to have equality so people won't have so many resentments. The idea is that, if there's massive inequality, people are really just filled with anger and resentment. And you could a clever propagandist could direct that resentment away from its true causes, which are, as we see in the Trump administration, the billionaires
exactly
take control of the government and privatize everything and make life much more miserable.
Now, on that topic alone, we're going to state this right here and now. That is a framework of the modern day Russian setup under Putin and the oligarchs. So now you've got the United States of America pivoting to a United States set up under Trump, the supreme leader, with billionaires that are oligarchs in positions of influence. It's really a bad setup, folks. You don't get it. I'm not going to harp anymore. This is more than enough just to plant the seed. You really need to think for yourselves. And we're going to make another pivot here. Research reports stunning surge of misogyny after the election. This is interconnected. You may not realize that, but it is interconnected.
This election, researchers documented a stunning rise in misogynistic rhetoric and attacks. Laura Barón-Lopez is here now with a conversation about what's behind that surge and how experts are combating it.
In just a 24-hour period after Election Day, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue tracked a 4,600% increase in mentions of the terms, your body, my...
Okay, now this is on the platform X. A billionaire by the name of Elon Musk. You give him too much credit. And I'll tell you why. X used to be Twitter. Elon Musk says freedom of speech. Meanwhile, he's modified the algorithm in his favor. So don't think there is true freedom of speech there. It's just switched to a platform of a certain type of speech in order to create influence, to influence the masses. Understand furthermore that everything you watch, everything you hear, everything that is spoken to you creates a suggestion or an event in your mind. And I say your mind, your brain, because I'm going to be frank with you. It cannot compute truths. It just stores data. And you wonder why you got all this chatter in your head? Because your hard drive needs to be fragmented. Wise guy, eh? Absolutely. But you don't get it. Unless you're consciously aware of what you watch, what you listen to, and what is being done, and on your own factor, you as well, you're 90% of the time on autopilot, you're being programmed, and you're not programming yourself for ideal operation of yourself. You're being manipulated. Your operating system on a biological level. And you say, well, how is that possible? Well, there's a lot of things possible. What happens if Alzheimer's could be eliminated by transferring files from the right hippocampus to the left hippocampus? You know, you don't get it. You don't realize. Unless you're consciously aware of what you're doing, how you're reacting on a moment-to-moment basis, what you watch, and how, if you don't filter it as it comes in, just gets stored there. Pay attention to your behaviors. It's a very simple thing. So here you've got X, 4,600% increase of a certain kind of behavioral pattern that's being projected to the masses. Brainwashing at its best.
My choice and get back in the kitchen on the social media platform X. One post by far-right activist Nick Fuentes has been viewed nearly 100 million times. But the misogyny is not just online. For more on this trend and efforts to fight it, I'm joined by Cynthia Miller-Idris, a professor at American University and director of the school's Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab, or PERIL. Cynthia, thanks for being back on the NewsHour.
Thanks for having me.
First, help us unpack this increase. What exactly did we see in this rise in misogynistic attacks online right after the election?
Well, first, we've been seeing that increasing trend for probably something like 18 months to 2 years over the last period of time on many social media platforms. And what we saw right around the election, leading up to the election, with a...
You notice the vehicle of choice here is social media. This is where the manipulation is happening on a mass scale, reshaping how people think, how people look, how people understand events, and not necessarily in a good way, unless you do your own fact-finding, create your own system of contrast to be able to find out what the truth is. Truth is only as deep as your belief system. So there is not much in the way of truth, because you create a belief system, and that belief system will override any real truths. And you just don't realize it. There's a little food for thought, folks.
Candidate who was a woman of color, and then the reproductive rights that were also...
Oh, and here's another interesting thing. I cannot verify it with factual evidence right at the moment, but there was a huge backlash of women to vote for a woman in power. I would never have thought a lot of women did not think a woman should be in power. Can you believe that? She cooked his arse in the friggin' debate.
So sort of at the heart of the election in many ways was a celebration in many ways by some young men who were viewed, whose posts were viewed many, many millions of times, of this reclaiming of power over women and power over women's bodies.
And as I mentioned, at least some of that same rhetoric and activity has since moved offline. How and where has that manifested?
Well, we've seen a lot of reports and heard a lot of reports, including in our lab, from schools and universities, even from an elementary school who's a parent who reached out to me and said her 10-year-old daughter had heard a boy chant at her, "Your body, my choice." I mean, it's unclear if he even knows what he's saying, but he knows that it's a sort of slur and an insult to say that. We had...
The system is being rigged, is being reprogrammed, and the kids are doing it. And that once that suggestion event is stored, the damage is done. And you don't get it. So this is as far as we're going to go with this. You got a serious problem. It's a serious problem around the world. It's not exclusive to the United States of America. But where it is especially dangerous is when the United States of America can exert so much influence on world affairs. And so what do I mean by that? Well, just recently, Orban, for a second time, Hungary. You've seen the movement happen there, the breeding ground, and perfect example of that is Orban in Hungary. You've seen it. It's a bona fide example. Once the seeds are planted, just got to water it every day and it just continually grows. And you have a situation where people have been manipulated. They think they're doing well. It happened in late 1920s, early 30s Europe. As a matter of fact, I knew a guy that went from Germany to South Africa because of the... I was able to actually speak to these people, understand their actual experiences to watch how this happened. And they moved from Europe to South Africa. And then in South Africa, they actually witnessed the uprising of the apartheid situation. So, you know, unless you understand or you have knowledge of these factors at play, you're very easily manipulated, and you just don't realize it. And then it's too late. The damage will be done, and after the damage will be done, you'll say, sorry, but you can't change what will have happened. So that's why it's so important for yourself. First of all, be kind to yourself and everything you touch upon, which will be your family. Kind to yourself, be kind to your family, be kind to your neighbor, your community, and then everything will mushroom outwards from there. If it's steeped on goodwill and kindness, that's what you're going to reap. Reap what you sow. Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. I've never read a Bible, but do unto others as you would do unto yourself is a great way to approach everything. Now, here's an example of what's going on. This is just 3 hours ago. Today is December 15th. And where this is problematic is it's happening in North Carolina. And you really need to pay attention here. There's another
example. This is
example.
Democracy Watch. Mark, we have some stunning news out of
Now, Mark Elias has done a lot of legal work, in trying to maintain democracy. And you say, well, maybe he's doing it just for the Democrats. No, he's doing it for democracy. For everyone. So you can have the choice to be a Democrat or a Republican and maybe another few options as parties. And this is what you don't get. You get hung up on being manipulated. You can't think for yourself. You can't think of what is good for you, your family, and what nurtures goodwill and goodwill amongst everyone. You can be good to everyone, or you can be just a bad person to everyone. Which way do you want to live? You have the choice. Here we go.
North Carolina, where the Republican-led legislature is enacting a power grab right now against all of these newly elected Democratic statewide officials. So can you give us the state of where things stand in North Carolina right now and what these Republican officials are trying to...
So give you a bit of an insight here. So the Republicans have got the major seats in North Carolina, but downvotes, there's this thing about downvotes. Downvotes, Democratic governor, a lot of Democrats in positions of authority there, downvote. And this is a very interesting thing, what they're doing here in North Carolina. It's a power grab, another power grab. You got a major problem. First of all, suppressing the right to vote. Go back to Lyndon Johnson, mid-60s. So you've got what's happening. Just DeJordy, as Postmaster General, has been suppressing the mail-in vote for ever since day one. Like, there's many things going on here you don't understand that's going on. You don't friggin' care because all you worry about is what's for lunch today. It's about time you just cared about yourself, your family, your neighbor, and doing the right thing that benefits everyone. No need for pain and suffering. You're warned that you're going to have to go through pain and suffering because they're manipulating you that way. They're setting you up for it, for their benefit. You just don't get it.
To do.
Yeah. People don't necessarily understand just how terrible the Republicans in North Carolina are, because they think of North Carolina as a purple state, which it is, by the way, right? It has, yes, it voted for Donald Trump. It was actually not, it was not a blowout state, but it also elected a Democratic governor, a Democratic Secretary of State, a Democratic Attorney General. And so it's very much a purple state. But when you look at the state legislative level, it is one of the worst partisan gerrymanders in the country. And Republicans have used that to not only wield power, but to wield it in a way that is extremely anti-democracy. And so what they did in this instance, which is just the latest in a series of really, really aggressive power grabs, is they took a bill that was intended to deal with the hurricane relief. There was quite a bit of damage, as you know, from Hurricane Helene, and they took that and they dressed it up with one anti-democratic provision after another. It strips the governor of key powers. It takes the state elections board, which is a bipartisan board, and it essentially transfers the power from that board in many, many key respects to the state auditor. Now, you might ask, why the state auditor? Because after all, what the hell does the state auditor have to do with elections? State auditor has nothing to do with elections. The state auditor is the only Republican, though, available to them on a statewide basis. So they did.
So did you catch that? Do I need to repeat that again for you? Like, how thick are you going to be, people? Time to wake up.
With one anti-democratic provision after another. It strips the governor of key powers. It takes the state elections board, which is a bipartisan board, and it essentially transfers the power.
Elections, and who handles the elections, the overseeing of elections, should not have be influenced in any manner by any party in order to have true democracy. And you're seeing how this is being manipulated.
From that board in many, many key respects to the state auditor. Now, you might ask, why the state auditor? Because after all, what the hell does the state auditor have to do with elections? State auditor has nothing to do with elections. The state auditor is the only Republican, though, available to them on a statewide basis. So they didn't want to move it to the Secretary of State because the Secretary of State is a Democrat. They prohibit the Attorney General from bringing or joining lawsuits that are contrary to any position of the.
Can you believe that? Suppressing the freedom of the people. You cannot adjudicate an adjudicator. Freaking the Attorney General. You're clamping him down to be a nobody. Like, it's a joke, folks. And you're allowing this to happen. It's worse than a third world country. And you're allowing that to happen by the Republican Party. It's been going on for a long time. You just don't get it. You don't pay attention because you've been fed a bad bill of goods. So let's look at something interesting here. This girl, Sarah Palin, this lady, Sarah Palin, pay attention.
Once you have nationalism, have fun hanging on to a non-contiguous empire because the locals are going to fight and resist. So Britain, in most cases, did not fight to hang on to its empire. It left and negotiated its way out, whereas France did the fight in Vietnam, which it lost, and the fight in Algeria, which it lost. The British didn't do that. Now, Russia is a different event. It's all contiguous. Wherever that Red Army is, it can hang on to it. And so, yeah, it hangs on to Eastern Europe forever. Great cost. But if you look over time, initially Stalin rebuilds and does quite well. But then you start looking in its 60s, 70s, all of a sudden their growth rates are not like Western growth rates. And yeah, they're still growing, but the difference is growing. And the compounding effects of this are enormous. So that if you fast forward to now, Russian standards of living is less than Mexico. There's nothing wrong with Mexico, but the Russians have this, this idea that they have this huge... they don't.
Yeah.
Once you have nationalism, have fun hanging on to a non.
You give the Russians just too much credit, folks. They got you hoodwinked. And they're working with your president to manipulate you. Who would ever have thought that Russia is an advisor to the President of the United States of America, effective January 6, 2025. Now, we're going to lighten things up a bit with a comedian, George Carlin. Now, this was, how many years ago? Many years ago, but it's been reposted. And so, why politicians divide us? George Carlin exposes the harsh truth. Whoops, wrong button. Wrong button. Hit the play button.
Politicians and the media always pushing the things that separate us, things that make us different. That's the way the ruling class operates in any society. They divide the rest of the people. They keep the lower and the middle classes fighting with each other so that they, the rich, can run off with all the fucking money. Fairly simple thing, happens to work. Anything that's different about us, you know that's what they're pushing at you. Racial differences, religious, ethnic, national backgrounds, jobs, income, education, social status, sexuality, anything they can do to keep us fighting with each other so that they can keep going to the bank. You know how I describe the economic and social classes in this country? The upper class keeps all of the money, pays none of the taxes. The middle class pays all of the taxes, does all of the work. The poor are there just to scare the shit out of the middle class. Keep them showing up at those jobs. Politicians and the media always pushing the things that separate us, things that make us different. That's the way the ruling class operates in any society. They divide the rest of the people. They keep the lower and the middle classes fighting with each other so that they, the rich, can run off with all the fucking money. Fairly simple thing, happens to work. Anything that's different about us, you know that's what they're pushing at you. Racial differences, religious, ethnic, national backgrounds, jobs, income, education, social status, sexuality, anything they can do to keep us fighting with each other so that they can keep going to the bank. You know how I describe the economic and social classes in this country? The upper class keeps all of the money, pays none of the taxes. The middle class pays all of the taxes, does all of the work. The poor are there just to scare the shit out of the middle class. Keep them showing up at those jobs.
Divide and conquer. Classic example, divide and conquer. Get the people fighting amongst themselves so they don't know what's going on so you can friggin' rob the bank. That's what's happening, guys. And you just don't get it. You want to change it? It requires taking action. It doesn't mean be a bad person. It means voicing your opinion, going out to the ballot box, putting people in place that work for you, not for themselves. And this is what you need. You need to open the lanes of communication. Express what you would like to see. Become active. You can do this in a very nice sort of way. Violence is not necessary for anything, but you have to participate. Doesn't help unless you participate. So that's it. So, as I've said before, do you want heaven on earth or do you want hell on earth? You have freedom of choice, the free will to have heaven on earth. And that means just a good, loving society that takes care of everybody, that benefits everybody, and everybody can prosper. People can actually prosper. I'm not talking about limiting people's wages or anything. Everybody can prosper. Or you can have pain and suffering and only the few benefit. Hell on earth. Pain and suffering and only the few benefit. It's your choice. It's a simple choice. Do you want to love and be loved? Or do you just want pain, suffering, and hate? Make up your minds. Figure it out. Snoopy and his good buddy did. They'll lead by example. Sometimes sitting on the couch doing nothing is a good thing.